two,
Welcome to the Clarinet Ninja Podcast. My name is Jay Hassler. I'm here bringing you the best in clarinet information and entertainment. Playing us in today is Mr. James Danderfer. If you like that music, I'm going to leave some links down in the description so you can check him out a little bit further. Today on the podcast, I've got two guests, Mitch Estrin and Gary Winder. Mitch Estrin is a player who played with the New York Philharmonic for what I would consider an entire career, and then started a second career, a very nice second career, teaching at the University of Florida. Mitch knows a whole gosh darn lot about playing the clarinet, and he was kind enough to come and share it with us. The reason it came to my mind was because of my friend Gary Winder, who works over at Danzer. Those are the fine people that import Vandoren products into the United States. And they have a newsletter. If you don't get it, you should. It's called the Vandoren Wave. Or maybe it's just called the Wave. I'm not entirely sure. Apologies for not being confident about that. But in that newsletter, there is some wonderful writing that gets done to give us some tips and ideas about the clarinet, how to play it, what to think about the equipment, all of it. And for many years, in the midst of his playing and teaching careers, Mitch contributed regularly to the Vandoren Wave, or to the Wave. Again, not so sure what it's called, but get on that list. I will. I'll see what I can do in terms of getting something in the description for that. COVID brought us a lot of things. Now that we're kind of coming out of it, a lot of things have emerged, and one of them is this beautiful book. And in this beautiful book, it's got sections for the teacher, the student, people trying to get into college, people trying to do all sorts of different things with the clarinet, and they're beautifully written. And the wonderful thing about all of them is that each one of them has a particular universal truth to it that will apply to anyone, regardless of any age. Some of the articles that are about first learning how to play the clarinet were really wonderful for me to read and really get back into touch with some of the more foundational ideas about how to play the clarinet. And the other articles, if you're not auditioning for college, that doesn't mean that some of these ideas aren't going to apply to you and get in your best performance wherever you play the clarinet. So I would strongly recommend checking this book out. And wouldn't you know, I'm going to go ahead and put that information down in the description and the show notes so that you can get your hands on it. In addition to that, you're going to find some information about me in the show notes and the description. And that information is how to get the most out of your clarinet playing by joining the Clarinet Ninja Dojo. Go ahead on to clarinetninja.com and you're going to find your way there. But let me tell you this. It's really about taking what I know about the clarinet, and if I do say so myself, it's quite a bit, and finding a way to make that just right for the adult learner, and finding a path that is uniquely yours, but do it in a group setting that helps keep the cost down and the fun up, let me tell you. And what I have found is that people are making incredible progress in charting their own path and having their own unique experience with the clarinet in the context of making really wonderful friends and having a wonderful, robust community of people that are learning to play the clarinet together. So if you're interested in something like that, go ahead and check out the Clarinet Ninja Dojo. All of that's down in the show notes. So please welcome Mitch Estrin and Gary Winder.
I think the first thing I want to do is get Mitch to tell us all about you, to whatever degree you want to reveal about yourself, so we can get a context from where all these essays came from, outside of, we know it came from a newsletter, but from the person that it came from.
That's a great question. I think that when Vandoren approached me in 2014 to start writing articles for their new newsletter, I just sort of reached into the back of my mind to write about things that interest me and that I thought would be interesting to other clarinetists. And there seemed to be a fountain that I opened up that was untapped before, just from my many experiences in a variety of the music field, both as an educator, as a performer, as an ambassador, as a corporate person. I just tried to reach into my fountain to bring things to light that perhaps hadn't been written about before.
Well, I'm curious to know, I mean, I know your career. I'm not an expert on it. If there was a quiz at the end of the book, I wouldn't answer all the questions right. But I'm curious to know, 2014, were you still in New York or had you gone to Florida at that point?
No, I came to Florida in 2000.
2000. Okay, I remember that happened while I lived in New York. I just would have put it another 6 or 7 years after that. Like I'm saying, I know what's happened in your life. I don't know when it was.
Yeah, actually, it was actually the end of 1999. I started at the university in August of 99
And were you teaching somewhere in New York before then?
privately.
And where in Florida are you? Tell us where you are.
I'm at the University of Florida, which is located in Gainesville.
So you've been there a long time now.
26 years.
Well, I think it's beautiful to have had like what I think is a full career, full stop as a player, and then to have another full career as a teacher. Where, I think that. Tell me if I'm right. I would imagine having one of them at a time must be a lot nicer than trying to mix them up. Or do you think?
Um, yeah,
What's your
I
impression?
think so. I think so. I think when one puts their entire focus into what they're doing, I think it's nice to have the luxury of either just performing or just teaching. Although teachers do perform, of course, but not with the same regularity that someone like who's doing a Broadway show or that has a symphonic job or a military band job. And it just seemed like the right move for me in '99, and I've never really regretted it at all. It's almost like I've had two full chapters of a career.
Oh, it's really beautiful. Now, I'm trying to place when Stanley Drucker left the orchestra, which I also can't do at all. Did
He
you guys
left
do
in
go
he
ahead.
left in 2009. He retired in 2009.
It is amazing. Like he also would have had more than a full career if he'd retired 10 years prior to that. I was when I was talking to Ricardo for his podcast episode that I did a couple weeks ago. We were recollecting going to hear the Copland Concerto after his 50th year in the orchestra, and then I think he did it again after 80 years in the orchestra. But it was an amazing thing to witness. It was really great. How long were you like? I know that you played as I don't know if you were a regular member of the orchestra or if you were a longtime sub. I don't know how that worked in the orchestra. What
Right.
was your role?
Well, I started out as a substitute, and then I started touring with the orchestra. I went on 19 tours with the orchestra, and then in the early to mid '90s, I started playing full seasons.
Nice.
I was contracted a season at a time until I left in '99.
As somebody who's freelanced and been in situations where they can let you go at any point in time, that sounds like amazing, but it also sounds very stressful in a sense.
I actually never, I mean, certainly playing an orchestra is not a non-stressful situation, but for me, it was always like enjoyable and fun and sitting amongst those players. I mean, playing next to Stanley and next to Peter Simonauer. I mean, how it was like the most fun thing you could ever do. So, I mean, as far as I didn't have job security, but I certainly just went to work every day and poured my heart into it as best as I could, and it was a beautiful situation for me. And actually, when I left, I still came back quite often to play. I sort of remained as like sort of the first call extra, and for the first 4 or 5 years, I came back quite a bit to New York to play.
Let me introduce Mr. Gary Winder, who's the other person whose face we see here. And Gary, welcome. And you work for Danzer. Would you please fill us in, because I still only have a loose hold on this, the relationship between Danzer and Van Doren?
Yeah, thanks, Jay, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this, especially for my good friend here, Mitch. So Danza is a corporation that was set up 21 years ago to be a distributor of musical products. And our primary product at that time was Vandoren. So we have a contract with Vandoren Paris to be their exclusive importer and distributor of Vandoren products in the United States of America.
I think that's loosely how I would have described the relationship. Before I met you, quite honestly, I thought it was kind of just the same company. Like that was my impression of it. But were you though? I know, Gary, that you had a big part in putting these together in a book, but were you the person that had the idea in the first place, or did you come on after that the articles had been written?
Yeah, no. Mitch and I first met. I think it was maybe my first or second year with the company. I'd previously been with Yamaha as director of sales for the United States for the band instrument company. So I was very aware of Mitch as a player because he was on our target list to become a Yamaha player. Mitch probably doesn't know that because we never ever approached him, but he was because we just knew he was a die-hard buffet guy. But at the time, we had a target list of players around the country, and Mitch was obviously on there, being with the New York Phil. So I got to know Mitch. We were actually at the Florida Music Educators Convention, and Mitch was there helping out, and we kind of got to know each other, and we're kind of the same age. We have kind of very similar sense of humor, and we just hit it off. The whole collection of what we're going to talk about later really kind of came about. That was Mitch on his own, with Vandoren. I really had nothing to do with that until COVID came along, and Mitch was like, "What do I do now?" And hey, I've got an idea. And I said, okay, do it. So he put all of his articles together and he said, well, what do I do now? And I said, well, we need to edit it first, because you can't, his articles were, they were one-offs.
Right.
No, they weren't designed to be 97 or whatever the number is. I can't remember now, but they weren't designed to be a collection. They were just one-offs. And so, we had to edit it and we were going to do it in-house. And what happened was that our graphics person just said, this is just way too much work for me, but I know somebody that would really do a great job at this. And she put us in touch with Cameron Hughes from Camco. And so he was the one who did all the editing, and basically in the end ended up producing it for us. So
Well, it's a beautiful book. I mean, Cameron did an amazing job. Now, and it makes sense to me when you're talking about it, not necessarily, they're all one-offs, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because when I look at it, like there's the target audience is kind of anybody that likes the clarinet, and there's places in the journey that somebody's in with the clarinet that there's something in here that's really, really relevant and valuable, whether it's a teacher, a professional player, a college student, a high school student. There's something for everybody. And a lot of times when I look at that, I look at a situation like that, I feel like, well, there's nothing great for anybody. But what's true about this is all this advice, even some of the advice that's for younger people or people that maybe haven't had a professional career, I read it and I think that's a good thing for me to touch base on. That's really important. And even now, as somebody that's played professionally for years and years, it's a good reminder for me. And it's written, thanks to Mitch, in a way that is absolutely accessible and not condescending to anybody. I love reading every page of it. It's an amazing thing to put something together that is relevant to everybody, as opposed to trying to hit a large target and not hitting anybody. I think it says the opposite, where it's really terrific in a lot of ways. And I got very nervous, Mitch, last night when I was flipping through the back of the book. I had never actually saw the quiz part of it. And I was very nervously turning to page 140 to see if I'd passed the test. There was a couple I didn't know. A lot of my program, maybe the entire program, definitely the entire program, is looking towards helping adults play the clarinet, and adults that are coming to it later in life or maybe have been playing for a long time, but doing it more recreationally. And I'm thinking of what do you feel are the most important things? And are there any of the pages of this book? Let me show it since I've got it displayed back here. Writing the Vandoren Wave. Was it 92 educational articles for clarinetists that you find is important for a college student, important for a high school student, important for a young adult, but also maybe particularly important for an adult learner?
Oh, that's a really great question. I mean, I think that all of us that play, whether we play professionally or whether we play as a hobby or whether we're studying for future playing, that fundamentals are the key. And as a teacher, I've always believed in fundamentals, and I had great teachers myself who stressed fundamentals because I think that all good playing comes from solid fundamentals. So when I first started writing my articles for the book, excuse me, for the Wave magazine,
Right.
the online magazine, I focused a lot on fundamentals because I think that, as I said, all good playing is built upon good fundamentals. So that's something that even, I mean, you think about the great tennis players and the great golfers, they all have coaches. And if if their swing gets off by a half a degree, it's the difference between winning and losing a tournament. So I think that I have had the privilege to coach beginners, also top professionals, in terms of helping them to have their game, to recapture their game. So I stressed fundamentals in the first few articles that I wrote for the Wave, and then encapsulated them in a chapter in the book. And I think that's probably a good starting place for any player, but particularly for students or older players who are doing it, coming back to it, or doing it for the first time, is the fundamentals. Because again, if people don't have a teacher or don't have a coach, I think that these fundamental articles will help solidify that to make playing a lot easier and a lot more fun. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, we all want to sing a song.
Right.
And in order to sing a song, we have to have freedom on the instrument to do that, no matter what level we are. And so I think that revisiting fundamentals, and I was always I think my number one thing in teaching and my number one thing in playing for many years, preparing myself for performance or for practicing, was fundamentals, long tones, scales, articulation, and then later on altissimo. But long tone, scales, and articulation are my three mantras, which my students will tell you that I reemphasize in almost every lesson that I give. And because I reemphasize them for myself, and the teachers that I had the privilege to study with stressed fundamentals. And then once Vandoren said, "Hey, we like your articles. Can you write some more?" Then I started to take a little bit more artistic license and to start writing on things that really interested me, like the Crusell concertos, or about playing in being a studio musician, or about some of the things that are a little off the beaten track from a normal textbook about clarinet playing. So I try to combine things that would be really helpful in an accessible way, and also some other things that you wouldn't find elsewhere that might be interesting for a musician or a clarinetist to read about, such as my one of my more popular articles on the Wave through the years has been the one on preserving one's hearing. It's something that musicians don't often think about, and certainly back when I was playing professionally, it wasn't something that was even talked about. And I always utilized earplugs from the mid 70s to preserve my hearing. And the last time I had a hearing examination at the Mayo Clinic, they told me I was age appropriate, and not for a musician, but age appropriate for a human. So that was very, very inspiring to me, and that sort of was the genesis for me to write the article about preserving one's hearing, because I played in some situations that were very, very loud, amplified, and sitting in front of brass and percussion for many years. Many of my colleagues now have to wear hearing aids or have hearing damage due to that. So I felt it was important. So I wrote on subjects that really just interested me, but I also thought could benefit the reader.
Well, I ran into the other night. It was a wonderful night. I went to hear Ron Odrich play with Roger Rosenberg, like a bus ride away from me in the Bronx. It was amazing. And John Manassi and Lawrence Feldman were there. And I, got to say hi and all that. It was a really, really nice time. But I feel like Lawrence Feldman is, to me, unfortunately for him, the real sort of cautionary tale of what can happen to one's hearing. Because I mean, he deals with this. Is it tinnitus or tinnitus? I don't know, but he has to wear earplugs and the headphones sometimes because his hearing bothers him so much, and there's that ringing in his ear all the time. And my understanding was that came from a feedback accident at a studio 40 years ago, or it's been a long time. And so, yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up on the heels. I don't see Lawrence very frequently, but I know that that's been a thing in his life for a very, very long time. I'm curious to know, like, when you were writing the articles, I mean, some of them definitely have, I don't want to say like funny and like not serious, but like some of them are so much lighter than other ones. And I'm curious to know, if that was just sort of based on how you felt in the moment, or if there was a larger plan involved in it.
Well, I think it had all happened in the moment because I
Yeah.
was writing 2 or 3 a month for several years, and just sending them off to Dancer to use for the wave, and they used them as they planned their issues. So I didn't really, when I wrote them originally, and I just kept writing, and I wrote almost 200, I think, up till now. I just kind of wrote on things that interested me, and then when, as Gary said, when COVID came around and I was kind of looking, as we all were, for things to do inside our own homes, I just sort of said, might be interesting to make a book out of the articles. And then I started to think about how I could categorize them and how I could put them together so there was some sort of continuity to them. And then I started to realize things like what you're saying here, is that some of them were a little more, research oriented, some were a little lighter, some had a little humor to them. And and as I put them together with the help of Gary and with the help of Cameron, we really came up with a good order, like a batting order, like you have in baseball,
Right.
as to how to organize them. And we Cameron came up with fantastic graphics to include with many of the articles, and some personal memorabilia of my own. So I think it flows together well, and I think that the book is different. That's what I like about the book. It's not, I didn't write another book like all the others. There are so many wonderful textbooks about the clarinet, beginning with the Kroll and the Rendell, the historic ones, the Thurston clarinet technique, and even some of the more modern ones, the New Sounds for Clarinet by Philip Rayfeld. There are so many that this book sort of is it's more conversational, and it covers a lot of different topics that I don't believe have been covered before.
One of the things that I got from reading through the book, I don't really know you very well. I've spoken to you a couple times. It's always been a nice time, but I feel like I know you from reading the book. It feels very much like I'm having a conversation with the person, even though obviously I'm sitting silently reading the book, which is really unusual. I find so many of the books that we have about music and about the clarinet to be, and I'm not talking about anybody specifically, but like dreadfully dull in terms of the reading experience. This was quite fun to read, and I feel like this gave me ideas that what was there on the 1 or 2 pages gave me thoughts that I wanted to investigate, I wanted to practice, and I wanted to go further into it in a way that I maybe wouldn't have been inspired to otherwise. And I thought that was a very, very powerful thing about the book, is that I would read one of the articles and I would have some thoughts, I would play some clarinet, and then I would do some more research. I would get more into whatever that topic was. And it was very, very successful for me to read it and then take it whatever step further was right for me at the time. So I really appreciated reading through the book.
That's
Yeah.
music to my ears. That's music because I wanted to appeal to a broad range. I would like to appeal to a high school student, a college student, but also to a professional player, in the hopes that it would reach them. Because it's interesting, because I said this to my class this past week, that we had a class on clarinet pedagogy, a fancy way of saying clarinet teaching. But I said the most important element in teaching is the human element. And I try through my writing, it's the way I express myself now, in addition to music, is through writing, is to try to reach people, to touch them in a way through my writing, so that there is a human contact. And you've just, thank you, reinforced that I was able to do that through the book.
Well, and the thing that is also of particular like interest to me is you were in New York at the time that I would like when I sit and think about where I would have wanted to be at a certain time. It was like New York at the time, where I remember in the article about the teachers at Juilliard I can't remember what specific set of years you were talking about, but it was, Allard and I think David Weber was it. David? Yeah, please tell me so I don't
Yeah,
bunk.
so Joseph Allard, Leon Rushinoff, Stanley Drucker, and David Weber.
Yeah, I sit and I look at the pictures and I think of what their voices were like. It's so much fun now that I can actually hear their voices by going on YouTube a lot of the time. I mean, the Allard stuff, he was a very old man, and it's a bad recording, but I still got to hear him talk about his stuff. But then I can look at the picture and and having walked around Juilliard and having gone to school in the building that used to be Juilliard, probably back at the time, which is now Manhattan School of Music, I can sort of put myself in that place, and it feels really it feels fun to have a connection to it, even though it's not really my connection. It's kind of your connection and your understanding and your experience that is, I think, both serious and, it's taking the clarinet and the history of our instrument very seriously, but also not necessarily taking yourself so seriously that it can't be fun to read. So like that stuff really intrigued me. And I'm curious, I don't know a lot about Leon Rushinoff. He, of those people in that group of people at Juilliard, I feel like the story that gets told about him doesn't really extend as far. Does that even make sense? Is that a coherent thing that I'm saying?
Well, it's very possible. Of course, he had so many students that were professionals who are
Sure.
still playing and teaching. He planted many roots in the field, and of course, one of the other things, and Rushinoff represents this. Of course, we all think about our family tree in clarinet playing, and for the American Clarinet School, really, basically, most of us go back to people like Bonad and Bellison, and then, of course, that's exactly who Rushinoff studied with, Bellison and Bonad. So my family tree comes from Bonad and Bellison, and then through Rushinoff and Drucker, because Drucker studied with Rushinoff, and I had the privilege of also studying with Rushinoff for periods of time. Because when I was in school, the Philharmonic used to go on extended tours, and 5-6 week tours. And Stanley said, "You study with Leon while I'm away." And so I would take lessons from Rushinoff while he was away. So I got to know Leon. And of course, the best way to get to know Leon is through his books, his method book, which I don't know if it's still published or not, but it's a magnificent.
I
Uh,
wanted to ask, I had two of them. I had volume 1 and volume 2, and then they're, I don't know where they are. The last time I saw them was in Alaska in 1988. They went out of print or something. I wanted to ask you about that because I would like to have them again, and I would buy them again if I knew how to do it.
I hope that they come into print again sometime, because I think they're extremely valuable, and you can learn a lot. You can get to know him a little bit by reading these books. And he spent a lot of years putting those books together. I remember he was writing them at the time that I was working with him. So he was a great spirit. He was a very, very human teacher, very enthusiastic, very affectionate man, very funny man, and very demanding as a teacher. And I enjoyed my time with him. I that's another reason I think that I wanted to write the book, because I happened to cross paths. Maybe just I was very fortunate chronologically in New York and at Juilliard with some great minds, people like Rushinoff and people like Joe Allard, and people like Stanley Drucker and Robert Bloom and James Chambers. Some of these people that were very influential on my career. So there were many pearls of wisdom. I think one of my chapters is 10 pearls of wisdom from people, and these are just things that have stuck with me and permeate my own musical philosophy and my teaching. And I just wanted to share those with people, because my dear friend Ben Armato, who was the clarinetist at the Metropolitan Opera for many years, who invented the Perfecto Reed and the Reed Wizard, great guy, a very knowledgeable man. I think in the preface to one of his books, he says, "Knowledge that is not shared is knowledge that is wasted." And I agree with Ben, and I think it's a great thing. And if I have things that I can share, they should be known by everybody. We all should. The sharing of information is so important in our community.
I agree. I'm right above the webcam that I'm looking at is my Reed Wizard. I'd pick it up and prove that I have it, except for it's holding up a stuffed animal of the character Plankton from Squidward that my daughter put next to it, so I can't. Otherwise, my whole set of shelves will come down. But the Reed Wizard, that is an amazing product. Like, I find that to be a product that I go to. I mean, when I'm working on reeds, I almost every reed that I put in the Reed Wizard comes out better.
Yeah, Ben was a genius. He really
Yeah.
was, and both the Perfecto Reed and the Reed Wizard are extraordinary tools for reedcraft.
Well, talk to me about the Perfecto Reed. I feel like you know, actually because of Gary, I bought one, right? Because Gary had one. He was talking about how great it was, and then I bought one off of eBay, and I can't. It came a little bit skewed, like the face of it wasn't quite right, and I've struggled to get it exactly right. And Gary gave me a chart, and I put my reads in it. But I feel like the Reed Wizard is perfect for me because any idiot can use it. Like it's so easy. The Perfecto Reed is way like I feel like there's a margin of error that I can put into it that's unacceptable for me because I'm not very good at that kind of stuff. Um, have you spent a great deal of time with the Perfecto Reed? Is that something that's been a read tool for you consistently?
Yes, it has. And actually, Gary and I spent some time together. When Gary and I get together, we've spent a lot of time playing and listening and talking about clarinet. And we got together. We spent some time using the Perfecto reed, and I don't think that any tool can make a reed that doesn't play very well. But if you have reeds that play well out of a box, sometimes you can make them a little bit better. Gary, what was your experience?
Yes, I mean, I'm a little bit like Jay also. I don't quite have the patience. Of course, the other thing about it for me is that working for Van Doren is that I have access to as many reads as I want. So, if this one doesn't work, but I do agree with Mitch. In fact, I'll tell a story. I was with Mitch a few weeks ago when Julian Bliss was in town doing the Mackey Concerto with the University of Florida Wind Symphony. And Mitch gave me a box of number 5 reads from 1981. And we opened up the box. It'd never been opened. I opened up the box, and I mean, I play on threes, 3.5. So I thought, oh, this five's not going to work. And Mitch said, well, the fives in those days are not the same as the fives today. So, I pulled out the reed, I put it on the mouthpiece, put some moisture into it, started playing it. It was incredible. And Mitch's test is always for balance. And the typical, play this way, see what the resistance. And there was just a slight more resistance on one side. So Mitch said, "Give me the read." So 2 minutes later, because he's a wizard at the perfecto read, he had it all measured and said, "Here's the problem." And it wasn't like it was a real problem because the read sounded good, but man, when he finished with it, it was one of the best reads that I've had in a long, long time. And so yeah, but I tend, I've got it out all the time in my music studio, but I tend, if I put a read, I try and rotate reads 6 at a time, and if one's on there and it's not quite working, I just go to the next one. And so I don't use it that often, not as often as I should. So, but I know Mitch, and if I can tell this story, Mitch, I know you've got a kind of a scrapbook where you've actually got the read from all of the performances, when you were with the Phil. And yep, I did this piece with this read, and these are the measurements. And the read is actually in, the scrapbook. Maybe you want to enlighten us a little bit more on that.
Well, it's like my Hall of Fame. I remember going to Cooperstown and seeing the plaques for Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and Sandy Koufax. It's kind of like my little Reed Hall of Fame. And when I had a read that I really thought was special, I would measure it to see if I could learn anything, to see if I could come up with some kind of, a common thread throughout the reads that were great. But I think what I learned is the rule about reads is there's no rules about reads. And but I would say that it depends on the kind of playing that you're doing also. Like in my case, in my years in New York, what I was trying to do, especially when I was playing at the Philharmonic, when I was playing second clarinet next to Stanley, was I wanted to make sure that every time that his clarinet came down, that I was right with him. And if you have a reed that's a little bit imbalanced, sometimes that reed doesn't vibrate all at the same time. I didn't want to be late or early or anything like that. And I found that by balancing the reed very well, that I was able to really make my entrances when I needed to make them. So I spent a lot of time with that because that was really what my job was to play along, with someone else who was the leader, and he was the greatest leader of all. And I wanted to be there for him whenever I could be. So I think if I'd been playing principal clarinet more often, I played associate for a while, and I did play a different kind of a reed when I played first than when I played second. You need something that's got a little more projection, a little more, zing, and you can you can push a little bit harder when you're playing first and when you're playing second. With second, you have to follow, and that balance in the reed was so very, very important for me.
First of all, I want to correct Gary on something. I very rarely correct Gary because he's always right. But I don't lack the patience to use the perfector reed. I actually lack the skill. I've got the patience. I'm inept with it. So at some point when I see you as a person, you guys will have to actually hold my hand all the way through using it. But it's funny talking about the balance of a reed and getting it to start and stop vibrating exactly when you want it to. That's one of the things that I really felt good about learning from playing on a synthetic reed, was that they came perfectly balanced. Like that wasn't really an issue. And playing on a reed that's perfectly balanced gave me insight into what that feels like on a cane reed. Because, there was a couple years, kind of spread apart years, that I played a synthetic reed, and I ended up, for different reasons each time, quitting on it. But I did come back with a better sense of what the reed's going to feel like when it's well balanced, because what I learned was I'd never really effectively balanced a reed. And the other thing, Mitch, I'm interested to hear your response to this. Like when a reed is perfectly balanced, I feel like I can be a more resistant reed, but have a cooperative resistance to it that really allows me to have more control over my sound in every way, from the tone color to the attacks and releases, everything. But if it's like, yeah, if a reed's unbalanced, it doesn't really matter what resistance it is. But if it's balanced right, I can play on a meteor reed or meteor feeling reed, and it's only good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I would say this, that I had many mentors in music, very lucky. I learned the most about reeds from Cal Opperman. I took reed making lessons from Cal Opperman in the 70s. There was a group of us that used to make the Vigil from Juilliard over to his apartment next to the Café des Artistes on 67th Street, and we used to go over and take reed lessons from Cal. So I learned how to make reeds from scratch, and I think that although I didn't continue to do that for my professional career, but the skills that I learned from making reeds helped me to adjust reeds. So that was one big thing that really was helpful. So I think even if you don't make your own reeds, it's worthwhile to buy some cane and to make some reeds, get some blanks and make some reeds just to see what it feels like to make a reed from scratch. And then I had another teacher, a fantastic teacher, who was a renowned New York musician named John Moses. And John was my teacher at the Aspen Music Festival for a couple summers. And John used to talk about getting the whole vibrating part of the reed working collaboratively, getting the whole surface of the reed vibrating, because he studied with Joe Allard, and Joe Allard was also a big advocate of balanced reed balance. And John was very helpful to me in teaching me how to get the entire surface of the reed vibrating. So not only equally, but the whole surface of the reed vibrating.
Right.
So that was very useful to me also. But this is, of course, is a never-ending topic. Gary and I have stayed up very late on many nights, discussing reeds and about, and of course, today the technology is so incredible. What they do now in terms of how they manufacture the reeds to such a small tolerance, and also the way that the reeds are sealed, so that the atmospheric conditions are not affecting the reeds until you actually open the flow
Right.
pack. Somebody said to me once, when you open the flow pack, if you inhale, you can smell the south of France. So anyway, it's a never-ending topic.
Well, I mean, my teacher in California, Gary Bovier, studied with Joe Allard, and he would talk so much about the conversations that he and Joe Allard would have about reeds, and that it was largely the majority of what was talked about at the lessons was how to adjust a reed, and how to get what you wanted from the reed. And it to a certain degree that makes, with what I know, putting together all the things that I've ever heard anybody say about Joe Allard, that does make sense, because he's really talking about he talks about the sound in terms of controlling the reed in a way that I feel like I never heard him talk about anything with direct experience. But I think when we talk about tone, so often we're talking about it a little bit more abstractly. Like it's somehow or another more magical than that. Like if you hear it, then you'll make it, or somehow or another do this or do that. But I haven't heard that many people tell me how to adjust a reed to make that happen. And it seems like Joe Allard must have talked about that a lot.
He did. He also was a huge advocate for overtones,
Right.
and that was very big. And I learned that both from Joe Allard's students, but particularly from John Moses, who was a student of Joe's, and Gary Bovier was we were classmates at the same
Yeah.
time
Nice.
at Juilliard. So it was quite a there were so many great players in the class at the time. But Allard really was a big advocate for overtones, and that's a big mantra in my teaching as well. Is doing what I call the Allard overtones and teaching the students about fundamental fingerings and how to voice properly. And Allard was a big advocate for that on clarinet, bass clarinet, and saxophone as well. So he was a great mind, had a true professor, Joe Allard.
This is just sort of an aside, but one of the things that a lot of people, you haven't done it, but a lot of people that have studied with Joe Allard say, they say, well, the magic of Joe Allard was he would only tell you what you needed to hear. And if you didn't need to hear it, he wouldn't say it to you. So everybody got a different version of his sort of bag of things that he would say. Okay, so I think that that's beautiful. I think that that's wonderful. But then they would, oh, not, I'm very much generalizing because I don't want to mention anybody specifically, will tell you what Joe Allard told them as if that's the only thing Joe Allard ever said. So it'd be weird because they would all say, yeah, he taught everybody different things because he only taught you what you needed to know. But then teach very, very seriously or talk very, very seriously from what they heard Joe Allard say direct from the source, which implies to me that Joe Allard was a very, very powerful and convincing and, good teacher because everybody knew you weren't getting all the information because you didn't need it, but everybody believed so much in the information that they had, like it was like the precious gold ring from The Hobbit. During COVID, one of the things I did was I watched his videos over and over and over and over. And then, but then when I was talking to more people about it, like, yeah, he was very ill when those videos were made. And that wasn't really him. But it was still pretty impressive at the advanced age he was to get the information out of him that I can't remember who was making the videos. Maybe it was his son or somebody else. I can't remember. Who were your teachers? I mean, you listed off some of them. Do you list off all of them? I want to get the full spectrum.
Well, my teachers from the beginning, I studied with my first teacher was a professional musician in Chicago. He was a show player and a high school band director. His name was Samuel Marin, and he started me. And bless him for giving me such good fundamentals. And then when I got into high school, I started to study with a man named Jerome Stoll. Jerome Stoll was the E flat and assistant principal of the Chicago Symphony, and he was in business with Frank Wells, and they made mouthpieces. If you've ever seen a mouthpiece called a Stoll Wells Schneider, which eventually became a Wells mouthpiece, he was in business, and there were still some mouthpieces that carry Stoll's name. And unfortunately, he died very young when I was in high school, and so I moved over then after Jerry passed at a very young age to study with a man named Walter Walwich, who was the second clarinetist of the Chicago Symphony. And Wally was the guy who got me ready for my college auditions. So they were my teachers before I came to the East. And then Stanley was my teacher at Juilliard for my entire time there, with moonlighting with Rushinoff when Stanley would go on tour. And then when I went to Aspen in the summers, I would study with John Moses. Later on in my career, I took a few lessons from Larry Combs, because my mother was living in Chicago, and I used to go there in the summertime, and I would attend the seminars at Northwestern that Robert Marcellus had, the great master classes in the summers, and then I would taking some private lessons from Larry Combs at the time. So those were my primary influences, with many other mentors along the way. Many of them didn't play clarinet.
Also want to know a little bit, or as even more, if you want to tell me more, about your involvement with the ICA.
Well, that we could spend a whole hour talking about the ICA, because my involvement with them has been very, very long. I went to my first, well, it wasn't called a Clarinet Fest then. It was the International Clarinet Society. It was called a clinic conference, it was called. And they were held at the University of Denver. And my first one was in 1975, which I think the ICA founded in I want to say in 1973. So the third year, I was in Aspen for the summer, and I was probably 17 or 18 years old. So I went to that conference, and then I went to a couple of subsequent ones at Denver, and then I just started to go to them through the years. Always read the magazine, and always was fascinated to hear players from around the world. In those days, there was no YouTube. There was no, you either had to go out and buy an LP. Remember those records?
Yeah.
You had to go out and buy an LP or a cassette tape of someone's playing who might be from another country or another culture. And of course, in those days, the schools of clarinet playing were much more pronounced than they were. If you heard a player from England versus a player from Italy versus a player from France or the American school in those days, you could tell right away just by hearing someone where they were coming from. Sometimes you could even name the artist. Of course, today with the more globalization of everything and mass communications, things are much more blended together, and it's more difficult to really ascertain where somebody uh, came from. So that started there. So I attended many clarinet fests, and then when I got my job in academia, they started and I started to bring my choir that I formed at the university to play. I started to become more involved in some of the day-to-day operations, as serving on committees and adjudicating for them. And then somehow in the mid-teens, I was contacted by the ICA nominating committee, asked me if I would run for office. And so I thought it would be a nice, I've gotten so much from the field, and I felt like maybe it was time for me to give something back. So I spent 6 years on the ICA board and 2 years as president. And actually, my presidency, which every president of ICA will tell you stories about what made their presidency unique. What made mine unique was COVID. That my presidency was right in the midst of COVID. 2018 to 2020 was my presidency, and we had some serious navigations to do in regards to Clarinet Fest, in regards to keeping the association up and running and fiscally sound during a time where there was no income coming in and where we had you know big contracts for our venues and for our festivals. And so that was the challenge of my time there. And I had the opportunity to work with so many great colleagues in the ICA and meet so many people, players, teachers, administrators, hobbyists, enthusiasts, students. I mean, the best way to make clarinet friends is to belong to the ICA and to go to ICA events. And now with all the events they have online as well, it's a great way to be involved with the ICA. I'm a big believer in the ICA, and I've been a member for 50 years.
Well, I was late coming to the ICA. Shouldn't even acknowledge this, but I think it's a powerful thing. My conversion, because I went to the clarinet convention 2 years ago in Denver, and I joined the ICA to do it. And I'd never been a member of the ICA before. And I had a really transformational experience at the clarinet convention. And all I could think to myself is, I can't believe I let so many of these pass by, because this was the most spectacular 4 or 5 days of my life. I loved every second of it. Yeah.
Every single one that I went to is I have so many memories. I'm flooded. One thing I will say is that, one of the things that sort of goes by unnoticed, and this is kind of where Gary comes into play and some of the other corporate executives, that there would be no ICA without the companies. The companies are the backbone of the ICA because they support the ICA. And Vandoren especially supports artists to perform. They support the ICA as a group, as many of the companies do. And so without the companies, it's often overlooked by the players and the teachers and the enthusiasts. But without the companies, there would be no ICA.
Well, I think that's an important thing to stay focused on. As I'm looking around the room, no one can see what I'm looking at but me. Like there's number one, there's a lot of Vandoren products. Got some mouthpieces right here. Vandoren mouthpieces right in front of me. Reeds, everything. It's hard to remember because it seems like such a transactional thing. I go on Amazon, I'm going to buy some reeds, or whatever it is. What's beautiful to me is that there's actual people at the company, and Gary being the first and foremost in my mind as a friend and someone that I like, I trust, and to walk in and see Gary at the Vandoren booth all of a sudden Van Doren isn't just some logo that makes reeds on mouthpieces. It's a person that I really care about, and that humanization of it is the only time I get that is at ICA. Well, I see Gary kind of frequently, so like I get it. We get it with Gary.
I'm curious about something that I don't know the answer to this, although Gary and I are very good friends. Gary, what was your first experience with ICA?
My first experience with IC, I had joined. I just moved. Well, no, I hadn't just. I was living in the country already. I'd moved here from England in 1987. So in the UK, our version of the ICA is CAS, which is the Clarinet and Saxophone Society. So I really wasn't that aware of ICA until I joined Yamaha. And Yamaha is obviously one of those companies you just mentioned. The backbone of ICA, one of the backbone, one of the vertebrae, if you want to say. And I joined Yamaha in 1997, and that was the year of ICA in Lubbock, Texas. So they sent me down to Lubbock, and it was the greatest convention. I mean, I've been to a lot of conventions, in 28 years now. That convention just sticks out. Well, apart from one special convention in Dublin last year, that convention just sticks out in my mind as I mean, I was sold. I love ICA. I love the camaraderie there, the assembly of all types of players. From amateurs, people that are refinding the clarinet because they lost it in high school and now they're starting again. In fact, just the other day, I get a call from a teacher down in San Antonio, and she says to me, Gary, I need to get a new R13. Mine's like 30 years old. I keep having it adjusted. Every time I get it adjusted, it still won't play correctly because the keys are just worn out. So she says, so I want to get a new one. And I said, well, Nan, how soon do you need this? And she said, well, I'm not in a hurry, but I know that you would know where to send me to get a really good clarinet. And I said, you know what you're going to do? You're coming to ICA in Dallas, Fort Worth in July. And she had no idea. I sent her the link. I said, hey, sign up for this. I said, and what's really cool for you, because she teaches a couple of students now, she's primarily an amateur now, is that they're actually going to have a enthusiast day a day before the show, just for players like you that aren't going to feel intimidated by the wonderful professionals that come to this. You're going to have your own little time, to go to master classes, lessons, check out gear. And she was so excited about this. She said, see, Gary, that's why I knew if I called you, you would have the answer for me. So, Jay, I know you're on that committee. So
Yes.
This is where it's going to work.
Yeah, no, we're having a meeting tonight to finalize. We're having a pre-convention online afternoon with some really, really wonderful things. That is a sort of a prelude to the pre-convention event. And it's very exciting. When I went to the convention in Denver, I went to all the enthusiast events and sort of sat quietly and participated fully. And Michelle Anderson was very kind to say, hey, why if you join the committee? So I joined the committee. And then there was only a certain amount of time that Michelle and Debbie could be chairs of the committee. And there I was kind of standing there at the right place at the right time. So I'm a co-chair of the committee now, and I get to, I've been pushing really hard to get this enthusiast day. And it's going to be actually like a day and a half because we're going to use the Tuesday and the Wednesday morning before the convention and invite people to come. And it's a very low cost addition to Clarinet Fest. And I think it's going to be really, really wonderful. And I think it's going to really help people just in those day and a half, but also prepare them to experience a clarinet convention. Because a lot of them come from places where they've got a local music store that has a couple mouthpieces and a couple clarinets, and then they walk into a room with all the mouthpieces and all the clarinets and all the reeds, and it's a little overwhelming. I've got to say, it's overwhelming to me. I've got to really sort of pace myself and pick and choose what I'm going to do because I'd have about 6,000 mouthpieces at the end at the end of the 5 days if I didn't put a governor on myself. But it is all very exciting. And Gary, most of all, thank you for plugging my event and getting us another person there. It's going to be a wonderful time. And please tell me when at a point where I'll remember who this person is, so I can make sure to introduce myself personally.
Yeah, well, no problem. I mean, I think it's great, and I've told you from when you first told me about this, that we definitely want to be part of that pre-show, because I think it's a great opportunity for people to come in on a one-on-one. Our idea is maybe an appointment every 15 minutes that they can pre-book online, and they get to select stuff in a very quiet, situation. So.
Well, the thing for me that is really inspiring is somebody who's playing the clarinet simply because they love it. Because, I love the clarinet, but I'll be honest to say that, like, there's lots of times I'll show up on a gig and not want to play it. And like, I just won't be in the mood that day. I took a gig I didn't want, or some complicated thing, but I'll be putting my clarinet together and I don't really want to play it. So when I'm surrounded by people that just love to play the clarinet, and that's the only reason they're doing it, they never need to make $1 on it, I find it really, it's like a shot of energy and adrenaline for me, because I'm around people that I aspire to be like that. I aspire to just be able to find my love of the clarinet all the time. So I'm really, really excited to be up front and center on that event. I think it's gonna be a great time.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we have Mitch's book there for sale.
Oh, absolutely. When I got your book in Dublin, I went through it, but then in preparation to talk to you today with this opportunity, I went through it again this week, and it really, I found the whole thing to hit the mark between the serious, like, absolutely true information that comes from where you got it, right? I definitely felt the history of the teaching and the instrument, but also put in a way that was beautiful, accessible, and fun. And so, like, the blend on that really, really is special. And it's funny to think about how things live online forever, but I wouldn't have access to these articles without this book. So thank you to both of you, Mitch and Gary, for putting this together and making it something that we can have. It's a wonderful sort of resource. Like, I leave it next to my bed. I point over there because my studio is in my bedroom, because I'm in New York, and I'll just open it and start reading it. And I feel like it's one of those books where you can just open it and start reading it, and there's something that is interesting. I mean, you can use an organized way of reading it, or you can just open it and check it out, and it'll promote thoughts.
That was sort of the idea for it. So I'm very happy to hear you say that, because when Gary and I talked about it, and Gary had a big influence on how the book was laid out and how everything was organized, that we talked about exactly that it shouldn't be something that has to be read like a novel consecutively, where you could just either you look at the table of contents and say, hey, I'm interested in that, I'd like to look at that. Or you could just kind of flip the book open and just say, hey, that's a nice picture. I wonder what that is. I wonder what that pertains to.
The childish version of me, maybe not childish, maybe magical version of me that says, okay, I'm going to open this book and the world's going to tell me exactly what I need to read, right? I'm just going to open the page, and somehow or another, that's going to be the most important thing that I could possibly run into in terms of information that day.
Sometimes the universe is gifts things to us. And I think that the great gift that I received in my clarinet education was to be in New York at that time, and to have intersected with some of those great minds and great players, and to be trained at that time in clarinet history. And so I filtered that information through as I wrote the articles, and then as I rewrote them more for the book, because I kind of reworked them so that it'd be more like textual as opposed to graphics oriented, or more for an online reading. And that's what I had in mind, was just to sort of pass along some of the things that I believe and some of the things that I was taught in a way that will appeal to people, so that they will want to pick it up and want to look at it, and to include a lot of not just educational things, but interesting things that they couldn't read out, that the reader would not find elsewhere. And also, through Gary and Cameron's help, was including some really spectacular graphics.
The paper feels good. I mean, like, even everything about this, like, the paper feels nice. It's heavy paper. Like everything looks, it's great. And it does remind me, speaking of like, growing up and listening to LPs, so much of the information I got was from reading the album cover or reading the liner notes. And this has a little bit of that same feel where like you're sitting with this thing that is that you're looking at, and it's just things are coming alive. It's really nice. And I played a small role in this cover, very small role in that cover, and I just want to say that out loud. A small but important role in the cover.
Very important.
Yeah,
Very important.
We'll leave those details just for the
Yes.
three of us. Anyway, listen, guys, this has been tremendous. I really, really appreciate your time and the effort it took to schedule us all. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Well, Jay, it's great to see you. Gary, it's always great to see you. And thank you for taking the time and the interest in the book. I so appreciate it. And you've given me something today that I'll remember, which is to let me know that the book reached you in a certain way. And I hope it will reach others too.
I hope it will too. I've already been telling the world, but I'll keep telling them.
Thank you.
I wonder if they listen to me, but I'll keep talking no matter what. Gary knows that. Okay.
Thanks, Jay.
All right, guys. I'll see you. Thank you very much.
Okay, Jay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mitch and Gary. That was a really wonderful talk. And again, I'm going to suggest going ahead and getting your hands on a copy of this book, because it really is a magical book where you pick it up and wherever you open it, you're going to find something that you like. And, I also just want to say, Gary did an amazing thing, encouraging Mitch to put all this together. Mitch is a real fountain of information about the clarinet. He knows just about as much as anybody, and it's very nice for him to share it with us here. It was very nice of him to share it over the course of the many years, writing for the newsletter, but also just really, really kind, caring, and willing to share everything he knows. And that's a real special thing. And I'm honored to have that here on the Clarinet Ninja podcast. We'll see you next time. Would you please rate and give us 5 stars? That'd be a real nice thing. All right, I'll see you next time.